The school bell has not yet sounded when a flatbed truck races down the street. 3 men leap from the truck, one carrying a shovel and the other brandishing a screener, a crude blade meant to slash through flesh. Their victim is mere yards from St. Joseph's School in Longford, where parents are accompanying their children to school, unaware that they are about to witness an attempted murder. A woman running behind the attackers raises her phone, recording every detail as they circle Patrick Stokes and strike. This isn't random violence. It's the latest outburst in a long-running feud that's been tearing apart an Irish town for over 5 years. Patrick falls to the ground with a knife lodged in his stomach, his clothes soaked in blood as fearful parents shield the eyes of their children from the bloodshed they are witnessing. The attackers quickly flee, leaving Patrick bleeding heavily on the ground as the woman continues to film, believing she is capturing justice. But this attack outside a primary school is not ordinary. It is the climax of a bitter feud between Irish traveller families that began with something as innocent as a Christmas photograph and escalated into shootings, stabbings, and street fights that have turned Longford streets into war zones. The violence didn't start with the attack in October 2024, but 3 years earlier at Christmas 2021. The traveller community in Longford had gathered together at the time to celebrate. At the get-together, someone had the idea to get everyone's photo taken to commemorate the festive celebrations. But when a member of the Keenan family declined to have his photo taken with a member of the Stokes family, what had appeared to be a minor social faux pas became something much darker. The Stokes family, already known for cruelty, saw this refusal as a reason to start a war. By the end of New Year's Eve 2021, the Stokes and Keenan families had completely split. The fight began just weeks later, on January the 24th, 2022, in the Ardnacassa housing estate on the edge of Longford. In just 20 minutes, the police had received 23 emergency calls about shouting, screaming, and the sound of gunfire echoing through a residential street. Jamie Dinnigan was in the middle of this brewing storm, fighting with Keenan's relatives in a clash that set the tone for everything that followed. When things finally came to a head, Jamie produced a shotgun and fired twice reportedly at the Keenan crew. The Keenan crew retaliated by driving a white Ford Transit operated by Michael Ward Jr., who was driving down the road at approximately 60 kilometers an hour and hit Jamie. This intentional hit was supposed to kill him outright, but when Garda arrived, they found a strange scene. Jamie was wearing only his vest and boxers. His wife Teresa and others were helping him. Garda investigators suspected the garments were taken off to hide evidence like gunshot residue, and their search of a nearby storm drain revealed unused shotgun cartridges, 2 empty shotgun shells, and a shotgun butt. His discarded clothes were found nearby. Jamie had minor injuries from being hit by the van, but the message was clear: this feud would be fought with deadly weapons. The legal outcome revealed a significant issue that plagued all cases in this situation. The Traveller Code of Silence made it commonplace for witnesses to retract their testimony under family pressure. John Keenan Jr. initially told investigators that he heard Dinnigan shout, "You're dead, I'm killing you, you are leaving this place," before the van hit him. But like almost all other witness testimony in the case, it was later retracted. By July 2024, when the case finally came before the court, more serious charges of attempted murder had been dropped because of a lack of cooperating witnesses, leaving Jamie Dinnigan with 18 months in prison for a fray and other related offences, and Michael Ward was banned from driving for 4 years. Ward also received another 30 months in prison for a separate fight-related offence, which he will serve after his current sentence. On the 16th of March, 2022, in broad daylight at the town's central shopping centre, a large brawl between women from opposing families was recorded on mobile phones and then uploaded to Facebook. In the video, 2 women were fighting on the ground as others watched, shouting abuse and encouragement, with deep-seated feelings of years of enmity being unleashed in a public car park where families were shopping. Margaret Ward, Winnie Ward, Bernadette Keenan, and Nicole Keenan went to court over their involvement in the fight. Weeks later, another fight was recorded outside a Topaz fuel station. In this incident, a 4x4 and a car pulled over in the middle of the road, and people inside hurled abusive slurs at each other. This showed that the conflict had become so ordinary that people felt at ease blocking traffic to shout slurs in public. The violence culminated on April the 5th, 2022, Tuesday afternoon, when Patrick Stokes walked into Luigi's fast food takeaway on Main Street. Martin McDonough had just walked into order when Patrick walked in with his wife Jacinta, who immediately started recording video on her phone, expecting her husband to lash out. With 10 to 15 people in the restaurant, including children, Patrick immediately walked straight up to Martin and attacked him with a Stanley knife. Martin then ran behind the counter to take cover from the assaults. Luigi's owner, Peter Vocella, rushed to the defense of his customer and was repaid for his bravery with a deep cut to the thumb. His intervention probably saved Martin's life, as the two men fought in the small space at the back of the counter. Martin had Patrick in a headlock for a moment or two, but Patrick managed to free himself, dropped the knife, and ran for it out of the restaurant with Jacinta still recording. Martin collapsed from massive blood loss and required intensive care in a Dublin hospital. Doctors subsequently stated that the swift intervention of Peter Vocella and others had prevented a murder. Patrick Stokes was sentenced to 12 years in prison, the final 12 months suspended after pleading guilty to assault causing serious harm. The sentence was designed to keep him off Longford streets until at least 2028. The judge said Martin's explanation of having been butchered was fitting and condemned the savage assault witnessed by children at a public restaurant. But in a failure of the justice system that would have devastating consequences, Patrick Stokes was somehow back on Longford streets by late 2024, whether through appeal, early release, or temporary release arrangements that the authorities have never fully explained to the traumatized community. In 2022 and 2023, while Patrick was in prison and as the courts were slowly making their way through the cases, daily life was terrifying. Constant threats, property damage, and fear that carried over into the families themselves. Houses were burgled at night, windows were smashed, and families woke up to graffiti on their homes. Social media became a weapon of warfare as members of families posted threatening videos of their enemies and made direct threats of harm. The police recorded numerous low-level incidents that they believed were in retaliation, and families lived in fear of the next assault. Local businesses began reporting significant economic damage as customers avoided Longford's town centre rather than risk being caught in feud-related violence. Tourism fell, house prices fell, and the whole community felt hostage to a battle between families that seemed not to care about the wider harm their battle was causing. The assault that brought us back to that October 2024 morning at the gates of St. Joseph's School was the culmination of all the hatred and violence that had built up over time. The attackers had apparently been watching Patrick, studying his routines, and waiting for the right moment to strike. By choosing the school drop-off hour, they ensured parents and children would witness their revenge, sending a message that there was no place in Longford safe from them. Blocking escape routes with the flatbed truck, having weapons in abundance, and Winnie Keenan's decision to record the entire attack reflected planning and forward thinking that converted the potential for a spontaneous fight into a pre-planned act of terrorism. Patrick's survival was largely due to luck and the nearby doctors, where he collapsed before being airlifted to Dublin for emergency surgery. The prompt response of the Gardaí resulted in organized raids that recovered weapons used in the assault and led to the arrest of David Joyce, Martin Keenan, John Keenan, and Winnie Keenan, all charged with violent disorder and possession of weapons. David Joyce, a key player in the feud and married into the Keenan family, had previous charges of weapons, while Martin Keenan was under observation for another feud-related assault and had weapons, including machetes and a samurai sword in his house. The judge refused bail to the men on the basis that there was a real and substantial risk of them committing further crimes. This action worked to demonstrate the court's understanding that this attack was a new level in the conflict. Patrick Stokes is recovering from his wounds. David Joyce and the Keenan brothers are in jail awaiting their trials, while Winnie Keenan was remanded on bail, and Jamie is already doing time for the 2022 riot. In late 2024, brought unverified reports of peace talks mediated by traveller elders from outside Longford, suggesting that even within the wider community, people saw that the violence had spiraled out of control and was damaging everyone. There are moments of fierce combat and moments of tranquility, but it can happen again in an instant. The issues that led to this war are not yet resolved. The desire for revenge is still there, and since the justice system does not always send violent individuals to jail, peace today can fall tomorrow. The real tragedy of the Longford feud is not just the distress and brutality that have been inflicted on those involved, but also how it has hurt a whole community that just wishes to live in peace. What do you think about the Longford feud? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Make sure to hit that subscribe button for more stories. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next one. This is the story of the Tuam Traveller feud, a long, bitter battle between two well-known families, the Wards and the McDonoughs, right in County Galway. Things started to heat up between the Ward and McDonough families back in the mid-1990s. Everything came to a head on June 2, 1996, during the funeral of local traveller businessman Bernie Mongan at Tuam Cemetery. What was supposed to be a solemn event quickly turned chaotic. Ned Ward from the Ward family confronted Bernie McDonough because he was standing on the grave, which Ward saw as deeply disrespectful. Even after McDonough apologized, the story goes that Ned Ward hit him with a brass knuckle duster. In seconds, the cemetery became a violent scene. A Garda sergeant estimated that up to 400 people were involved in some fierce fighting. Many of the injured had at least 9 people needing hospital admissions for broken bones and deep cuts. Edward McDonough Sr. even noted that his wife was hit with a spade, and his daughter was knocked unconscious to signify just how vicious the fight became. But it wasn't just any fight. It felt like a declaration of war, with years of hatred between the families leading to this moment. The violence got worse the day after the cemetery brawl. A mob of some 100 Ward family members, many armed with makeshift weapons, laid siege to the McDonough family home. During this terrifying assault, a gun was allegedly produced. A witness identified Dennis Ward with a shotgun, and one witness claimed to hear a shot being fired. Investigations led to charges against 35 people, almost all members of the Ward family. The subsequent trial in February 1997 in the Tuam District Court became one of the longest and most complicated in Irish history. Evidence was presented over 16 days, covering weapons, injuries, and damage. The result was that 22 members of the Ward family were convicted on various charges stemming from the cemetery riot and the attack on the McDonough home. The anger from 1996 resurfaced and threatened the peace of Tuam. Fighting flared again when a bare-knuckle brawl ensued between the rivals in the center of Tuam's town square. There were now fears of a huge street battle with hundreds of Wards and McDonoughs in the streets. An enormously successful attempt by Gardaí had averted a devastating massacre. The Gardaí took control of Tuam, separating the rival groups and finally brokering a tense 90-minute sit-down between the leaders. From it would come the Good Wednesday Agreement, which was further solidified when representatives entered a truly historic village peace treaty together in September 1998. For about 2 decades now, the path of that treaty has been protected. Most of the time, both families would honor the feud pause agreement by restraining themselves from direct violent eruptions and agreeing to live at peace beyond the reach of anger. In 2010 saw another generation raised within the Ward and McDonough family. These were the young men and the nephews, inheritors not just of the family name, but also of well-cultivated, deep-rooted issues and historical stories painfully developed over the last 2 decades of uneasy peace. Since then, the world has transformed like never before, and with it, the methods of conflict. The internet and social media offered these young ones novel and insidious ways to anger each other without recourse to direct physical confrontation, and the digital space was becoming a volatile battlefield. It became more common for disputes among Irish travelers to be fought publicly via platforms such as Facebook and YouTube. Challengers would record and post video call-out challenges in often vulgar and provocative language designed to bait and humiliate their opponents. These videos, recorded on mobile phones and widely broadcast on other social media channels, brought an almost showy or theatrical element to the infighting. The fragile peace so painstakingly constructed and maintained since the Good Wednesday Agreement was permanently broken in 2021. Appropriately for an age of screens and online images, its demise did not start with an actual confrontation, but with a digital one. In the spring of 2021, a storm of heated language erupted between key members of the Ward and McDonough families on social platforms. This online clash of words grew and pulled in more people to join and watch. 2 men, in particular, took center stage in the digital arena, becoming the main players in this renewed dispute. Tom Smurf McDonough, representing the McDonough side, and Denny's Anthony Ward, speaking for the Ward side. Anthony's nickname, Denny's, was a clear way of tying him straight to his father, Denny Ward, and showing his place within the big Ward family tree. By April 2021, their online argument had turned into a public show, catching the eye of the broader traveler community. In one bold video that spread fast through traveler WhatsApp groups and beyond, Anthony Ward showed up on camera, flashing thick stacks of cash, a total of 60,000 euros. He used this open show of money to mock his rival, looking straight at the camera and stating this big sum as his bet for a one-on-one bare-knuckle fight. This public challenge meant anger and shame, and opened the door for a physical clash. Tom McDonough didn't waste time in putting out his video response. He jumped at the chance Ward offered, but he took it a step further to show he meant business and brushed off Ward's tough talk. "We can go as big as we want with this," telling Ward to put up as much cash as you like. He made it clear that for him, the money wasn't the main thing. What counted was his reputation and coming out on top. They picked a date in mid-July 2021 for this high-stakes fight. Excitement spread through Ireland's traveller community, with many keen to see how this new part of the feud would play out. They chose a quiet spot in the countryside, far from cities and nosy people, to keep the Gardaí away. They marked out a rough ring with ropes and traffic cones in a hidden field to make a quick arena for the harsh contest. To keep things fair and keep the betting money safe, they brought in known bare-knuckle boxing figures, Davy Joyce and Michael Sweeney, to act as fair play men serving as judges. McDonough, with his natural height and reach advantage, seemed poised for victory, but Ward, known for his aggressive style, came out swinging with unrestrained force. Within minutes, Ward landed a powerful right hook that sent the taller McDonough sprawling to the ground. As McDonough struggled to regain his balance, he broke the conventional rules of bare-knuckle boxing and lunged to keep punching his downed opponent. This act immediately signaled a disregard for the established code of conduct. As the rounds wore on, Ward's anger began to take over. After a series of grappling exchanges, Ward suddenly ducked in and delivered a vicious headbutt to McDonough's face, an illegal move in any fair fight, and one that drew gasps from the onlookers. Despite this blatant foul, the fight resumed, continuing for several intense minutes, both men trading heavy blows fueled by adrenaline and animosity. In the 7th minute of the brawl, as McDonough and Ward clinched in exhaustion, Ward again smashed his forehead into McDonough's face, a second headbutt. The crowd roared with anger and disbelief. Less than 2 minutes later, Ward committed the foul a third time, lunging forward and cracking his skull into McDonough, once more sealing the fate of the fight. After 7 minutes of intense fighting, the fighters are encouraged to shake hands, but both men disregard the suggestion. Tom McDonough, his face bruised, bloodied and swollen, was utterly enraged by Ward's blatant cheating and disregard for the rules. What was supposed to be a duel to resolve the feud had instead turned into chaos and disgrace. Far from resolving anything, the fight only inflamed the hatred between the families further. Tensions already stretched thin after the chaotic bare-knuckle fight remained dangerously high throughout the summer of 2021. The Wards and McDonoughs, still far from reconciliation, continued their online battles, trading accusations with intense fury. Each side claimed the moral high ground, asserting that the other had acted dishonorably, further cementing their grievances. It was clear to anyone paying attention that this escalating dispute was just a matter of time before it would explode into something bigger. That grim prediction materialized with shocking and tragic precision on September the 22nd, 2021, in an uncanny and heartbreaking repeat of history. Once again, a funeral in Tuam became the flashpoint, a sacred occasion desecrated by the raw, unbridled hatred of the feud. On that fateful day, 2 separate funeral services were set to take place at the Tuam Parish Church and the nearby cemetery. The first service, held in the late morning, was for Martin Ward, a man in his 30s from the Ward family. The second funeral, scheduled for 2 p.m., was for Teresa Tessie Ward, the beloved matriarch of the Ward family, who had recently passed away. After Martin's burial, many family members stayed at the graveside, waiting for Tessie's funeral. Interestingly, members of the McDonough family also showed up to pay their respects at Tessie Ward's funeral. In what now seems like a naive attempt at civility, Gardaí later reported that some McDonoughs even helped carry Tessie's coffin as it arrived at the cemetery for burial. An extremely fragile and dangerous situation was like a powder keg ready to explode. A fierce confrontation unexpectedly broke out between the McDonough group in the procession and Ward family members gathered nearby as Tessie Ward's casket was being lowered into the grave around 3:30 p.m. Subsequent investigations had difficulty determining who threw the first punch or what exactly set off the initial spark. The commotion was too quick, too overwhelming. But within seconds, chaos consumed the somber funeral scene. Individuals from both sides, clearly prepared for conflict, produced weapons they had covertly brought with them. Gardaí accounts and frightening video footage from the scene later showed a terrible inventory of weapons like knives and baseball bats were swung. Even more unsettling, the parish priest later testified that he saw men wielding Stanley blades slashing at random people. Around 30 Gardaí were alerted and arrived quickly to the cemetery to find chaos. Around 100 people were involved in a terrible fistfight. 5 ambulances and an Irish Air Corps helicopter were called to treat the wounded at the scene, some with terrible injuries. 5 men and 2 women were badly hurt enough to need hospital treatment. At least one victim was severely hurt. The helicopter whisked him to University Hospital Galway. On the day following the violence, the fighting families once more resorted to social media, seemingly unaffected. Their posts this time were open, defiant threats following the uprising rather than just boasts. Each side posted public video statements vowing to continue the feud with renewed ferocity. Although each side often asserted the other had fled first, these unflawed, unedited videos quickly spread across social media channels and even appeared in mainstream news coverage, providing the general public a rare disturbing glimpse into the deep-seated conflict that continued to torment the neighborhood. Acknowledging the seriousness and public nature of the circumstances, law enforcement swore to bring those responsible. Treating the event as a serious criminal matter, a thorough inquiry began. All available video evidence was examined, and dozens of eyewitness testimonies were gathered to build a strong case against the attackers. Many men were charged for their participation over the next year. Notably, John Smurf McDonough Sr., the 52-year-old father of the McDonough family, was seen on video aggressively engaged in the battle. A man who had been there at the 1996 fight, he was now physically fighting on the same sacred ground a quarter-century later. After a 2024 trial, a jury convicted John McDonough of violent behavior for his major participation in the 2021 incident. For his part in what the judge flatly described as nothing but disgusting, John McDonough Sr. received 2 years in prison in June 2024. Right after the devastating 2021 fight, a noticeable wave of dread and fatigue spread throughout the community. Realizing the great depths to which the dispute had sunk, fresh attempts were made, usually behind the scenes, to calm the anger. Some elders on both sides who were greatly disturbed by the most recent bloodshed tried to arrange for a new, long-lasting peace. Stepping forward as a vital negotiator was Edward McDonough, brother of John Sr. and a well-regarded boxing coach, who had deliberately kept himself away from the aggression. He later testified that between late 2021 and 2022, many peace summits had been held. These high-stakes talks included not just family representatives, but also a local Garda inspector, and even a former mayor of Tuam. Initially seeming hopeful, these discussions followed the spirit of the prior Good Wednesday Agreement deliberations. Edward McDonough said that for a long time, there were no major occurrences, suggesting a period of relative tranquility and therefore a ray of hope that the cycle of violence could finally be broken. However, the deeply entrenched cycle of revenge, fueled by generations of grievance and a culture of retribution, proved incredibly difficult to break. Though the Tuam burial fight represented a horrific peak in open violence, it was far from over. Over the next months and years, Galway's traveller community was still afflicted by smaller hidden flare-ups. The remnants of the conflict never totally went out. They just died down, ready to burst with new ferocity at the right conditions. Worrying signs started to appear late in 2023, pointing to a dangerous escalation that could undo all attempts at peace once more. One particularly alarming development was the feud's geographical expansion. Originally limited to Tuam, the conflict started to spread into neighboring communities. A 20-year-old man was arrested in one terrifying case in 2023 for a violent feud-related incident that sent shockwaves throughout the community. In a horrific bid to eliminate rival family members, he purposefully drove a car towards two people. Later, he admitted guilt to endangering lives. This event was a sign of things to come. Following this act of vehicle assault, a horrific sequence of homemade bomb attacks started in November 2024 and aimed at numerous residences directly related to the fighting families. Unidentified attackers, working under the cover of darkness, targeted these homes. One night, a house on the Headford Road area of Galway City, known to be home to some ward family members, was firebombed with a homemade petrol bomb. The house in Tuam, long known as McDonough territory, suffered a similar fate the very next day when suspects threw a petrol bomb and fled in a car. Gardaí promptly verified that these events were directly related to the ongoing dispute, highlighting the organized nature of the attacks, and sent public emergency pleas for information, hoping to stop the tide of violence. Once more, The ongoing and horrific threat was highlighted in January 2025 when an unknown man tried to petrol bomb a home on Gilmartin Road in Tuam. Fortunately, the device didn't completely ignite in this case. The perpetrator sped off, but the incident reminded everyone of the ongoing lurking threat. Tuam residents now live with a terrible and painful fear, and the worry that their home might be the next, or even worse, that they might be caught in the crossfire of the quarrel's next unpredictable and unavoidable explosion. Despite all attempts at reconciliation, legal action, and local outreach, the fight still flickers. What do you think about the ongoing Tuam feud? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next one. It's broad daylight at McGinley's petrol station in Derry, Northern Ireland, at 12:40 p.m. on August the 17th, 2021. CCTV shows a small hatchback crashed into by a grey BMW, which caused the car to spin violently across the fuel station area. As a horrified mother pulled her small daughter from the wreckage, narrowly escaping more catastrophe, the scene was chaotic. But what looked like a traffic accident soon spiraled into something far more sinister. This was part of a bitter family feud that had been simmering for decades, and not a traffic collision as we first thought. 6 men, some masked, showed up at the pump area with far from amicable aims. Armed with crossbows, pitchforks, and handmade weaponry, they first charged at each other in a scene of total chaos. In the fuel station area, the chaos never stopped. It extended into a nearby shop where Garda later showed up and arrested several suspects. What appeared like a casual street fight was anything but. It was a brutal eruption of an ongoing feud between 2 branches of the renowned Stokes Traveller family, and the violence was far from over. The confrontation was personal. Members of the Derry Stokes group and their Longford rivals, 2 families deeply engaged in a fierce and growing battle, were involved in the incident. A woman with a broken ribcage was left after the terrible violence, and a man lay on the ground, his skull broken from repeated blows. This was a family argument that had reached its boiling point, and its effects were far-reaching. Gardaí swiftly apprehended 6 men involved in the violence. Among them was Kevin Stokes of Derry, who was charged for his participation. He was charged with fighting, possessing a crossbow, and inflicting serious physical injury with intent. Prosecutors claimed Kevin had assaulted an opponent lying helpless on the ground, a horrible action that left the victim with significant wounds. Kevin was with his brother Dylan Stokes, who was charged with dangerous driving in connection with the incident. Then there was a 14-year-old boy, whose identity was protected by law, accused of carrying a pitchfork and a knife in public and participating in the brutal fight. 2 other men charged were involved with the Derry Stokes side. The petrol station brawl was just the start. The violence did not cease with it. The battle later turned more violent in less than 24 hours. At a traveller camp on the outskirts of Derry, a fire started. 2 caravans burning were discovered by firefighters and Gardaí when they got to the scene. Clearly set on fire deliberately, the fire was no coincidence. The ruined caravans belonged to the Longford Stokes group, the same family who had fled their homes as they looked for safety from the previous day from Derry. The fire was connected to the fight, a revenge gesture intended to send a message. The conflict was far from over, and neither side could find a simple exit. Fortunately, firefighters were able to stop the fire from spreading to other surrounding mobile homes. Thankfully, no one was inside the caravans when the fire broke out. The message had, however, been sent. The violence would go on. For their bail hearing, the 5 people involved in the petrol station fight showed up in Derry Magistrates' Court the next day. Despite the brutality of the aggression, the court decided to release all 5 defendants on bail. Under severe circumstances, each was released, including a command not to have contact with the victims or any members of the competing family. The prosecution fiercely opposed bail, noting the continuous tensions and extremely real risk of more violence. According to a Garda detective's testimony, there was a high likelihood of retaliation should the two groups run across paths once again. The prosecution said that setting the defendants free could jeopardize public safety because innocent bystanders had already been drawn into the violence. It came out at the same hearing that at least 2 of the Longford-Stokes men were wanted by authorities in the Republic of Ireland for major crimes. This only complicated the case, as legal actions were slowed down by the families living across several areas. The wheels of justice were turning sluggishly, and the conflict was far from being settled. The Stokes families were stuck in a battle not going away anytime soon, as the legal process dragged out. The media barely covered any immediate confrontation between the two groups for much of 2022 and 2023. While the Derry Stokes stayed in their home region, the Longford-Stokes group had retreated southward. Though the families kept a low profile, tensions were building under the surface. Gardaí intelligence showed that the disputes had not been settled. Both sides were just waiting for the perfect time to strike once more. Although the public excitement had subsided, the animosity among the families had not vanished. Social media kept the argument alive. Messages and videos spread in which associates of both sides insulted and even issued fight challenges in person. Although these talks were primarily verbal, they kept feeding the conflict between the two families. The online sparring reminded frequently that the conflict was far from past. The growing anger had not been reduced. Rather, it was just poised for another outburst. And that chance came around by the close of 2024. Just 2 days before Christmas, news spread that 2 members of the Derry and Longford-Stokes groups had set up a no-holds-barred fight. The location is Burt Cemetery, about midway between their 2 areas. This was a public challenge meant to permanently resolve old scores, not only an underground battle. Acting on intelligence, Gardaí arrived at the cemetery to find the 2 sides already locked in a savage battle among the tombstones. Among those engaged was Thomas Mongan, a member of the Derry Stokes faction, who was observed fighting another guy thought to be from the Longford-Stokes side. The Gardaí quickly moved to stop the battle and physically restrained Mongan and other people using pepper spray. Mongan was apprehended on the spot. Some of the men ran when the authorities showed up. The other main fighter's identity was not disclosed, but the incident served as a serious reminder that the Stokes family conflict was still unresolved. The Gardaí had no choice but to intervene, as the violence that had characterized the confrontation at the fuel station and the arson attack was now pouring out into public areas. Thomas Mongan admitted misconduct for his part in the cemetery melee by April 2025. Though the sentence was suspended for 24 months, the judge chose leniency despite Mongan's long criminal record and gave him 2 months in jail. This relatively light punishment led to questions about whether the legal system was prepared to manage the growing violence surrounding the Stokes family dispute. The authorities were having great trouble containing the violence despite the explosive outbursts and open altercations. The Stokes feud went unaddressed as the year came to an end, and the judicial cases arising from the August 2021 fuel station battle were still pending. The trials were postponed, with no definite end in view. Particularly with the families residing in several areas, authorities worried that the cycle of retaliation could go on endlessly. Still to be answered was the question of whether the violence might ever be halted, or the Stokes families were condemned to dwell in a never-ending circle of revenge. From a fuel station altercation, the Stokes versus Stokes battle had grown into a string of vicious confrontations, arson attacks, and no-holds-barred fights. The authorities had attempted to mediate, but the underlying hatred between the families made it almost impossible to stop the cycle. It seemed that this conflict would haunt Derry for years to come, as legal procedures took a long time, and public violence remained a very real threat. What are your thoughts on the ongoing Stokes family feud? If you like this crime story, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next one.